here today to talk about Aurifil thread and the benefits and the reasons why, as a shop owner, I chose Aurifil thread to have in my shop. It's the only the only thread that we carry, and we love it. So I'm going to pass this over to you to explain to us some of the benefits of Aurifil thread to start with.
All right. I think what I'll do is go back a little bit into the history and how Aurifil came about, which helps you to understand what the benefits are. So Aurifil began, actually it'll be 40 years next year since the start of Aurifil thread. And it came about because the Grigotti family owned a company called Studio Auriga. And Studio Auriga was the distributor for high-end embroidery machines. So 30 head embroidery machines for the fashion and fine linen industry. And those companies kept coming to them saying, you know, it's great that we have these wonderful machines, but we want a natural fiber thread that's going to stand up to the rigors of the machine. And there's nothing out there that does it. And so that caused Angelo Grigotti to approach his friend, Mr. Veronelli, to go into business with him and develop a cotton thread that was going to be strong and have a sheen and appearance that was going to work well within the couture and the fine linen industry, but be strong enough for those machines and the rigors of those machines. So they set out to do that. It was just over 40 years ago. And they sourced cotton from the Mako region of Egypt, which is the best growing region in the world for cotton. And then they set about developing a method of twisting and spinning that thread, which would give you the strongest, most lint-free cotton thread possible. And they achieved that. And those are some of the benefits of Aurifil thread. It is the strongest of the cotton threads in the marketplace. It's fine. It's one of the finer cotton threads. It's a 2-ply thread. And it also is strong enough to withstand the rigors of those high-speed 30-head embroidery machines, and yet has that strength and sheen and just glides through the needle of the machine in a way that makes it second to none.
Right. And that's what we find here too. It is so much less linty than other threads that we traditionally use. And it is a fine thread. It just slides through the needle so nicely, whether it's by hand or machine. It's such a lovely thread. Mm-hmm.
And it's really about that manufacturing process and the steps that they take to make sure that that happens. So 2 of the things that affect the low lint are, first of all, well, 3 actually. First of all is the quality of the cotton that's used. It's an extra long staple cotton, which means that you have less joins in the cotton thread, which also contributes to the strength of it. It's also a 2-ply thread, and we can talk about that in a bit later, talk about plies and weights and so forth, if you wish. And it also, 2 of the processes it goes through, one is the gassing, where they pass the thread by a flame, and many cotton thread companies do that. Aurifil has just achieved it. There's a very fine line between singeing off the lint fibers and burning up the thread, and they've hit that fine balance. And then the final step is that it goes through a very fine paraffin bath, which just seals in those fibers, but doesn't leave any waxy residue that would gum up your machine. Mm-hmm. And so that low lint is excellent. And it's not just about not seeing lint on your work. It's also about it being better for your machine. And interestingly, the technician who looks after my machine here, when I first started using him, he brought with him a spool of Aurifil thread when he cleaned machines. And I said, oh, I'm interested that you've got Aurifil with you. He didn't know that I was the distributor, or my company was the distributor for Aurifil thread. And he said, And he just kind of grinned at me and said, yes, he said, I try to educate people that the #1 cause of machine breakdown is bad thread. And this is the only the only thread they should be using in their machines if they don't want to be funding my retirement, basically.
Wow, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful. It's nice that he recognized that and was willing to share that information with his client. That's excellent. Yeah, very good. So just a quick overview of all the different types of threads that are available through Aurifill. Now, we don't stock them all here, but we are more than willing to order anything that the customer wants or needs. And that comes from within Canada. So it's not all of the hassle of cross-border shopping and all of that sort of thing that a lot of us are experiencing right now when we have to bring things from the States. So it's lovely that I can get it from a Canadian distributor. I know that the thread is not made here, but it's just so nice that it's distributed through a Canadian distributor. So
thank you.
The types
and we carry a good stock of that thread so that you can get it easily, I think, as you know. So we carry a pretty robust stock of all of the sizes and all of the weights of Aurifil thread in our warehouse in Calgary. And if we don't have it, we're placing orders that are coming by air every 1 to 2 weeks from Aurifil in Italy. So anything that we don't have, you can get quickly. And we, as you know, we allow you to purchase single spools. So if your customers are wanting just one small spool of an unusual color, then we're more than happy to provide them with that.
Good, excellent. So let's just go through the types of thread quickly so that people know sort of the gamut of thread that's available.
Yes. So the most common and the most popular thread, and you carry a fair bit of this, is the 50 weight. And so, and I'm just going to digress for a second to explain a bit about weights, because the weight of a thread is based on the weight of 1 ply of thread. So it's really important when you're looking at thread weights to know whether your thread is 2 ply, which is going to be the least number of ply because you have to have it twisting, or is it 3 ply? So if you have a 50 weight 2 ply compared to a 50 weight 3 ply, that 50 weight 3 ply is going to be 1.5 times as heavy or as thick as the 50 weight 2 ply. So many quilters have gotten used to saying, oh, I'd like a 50 weight thread, but they really need to understand when they want a 50 weight thread, they want to make sure they're getting what ply that thread is, because that affects the weight as well. And the thickness of the thread. So that 50 weight 2 ply, all of Aurifil threads are 2 ply, with the exception of the 140 weight 3 ply that's been added to be an extra heavy thread for quilting. So the 50 weight is used most often for piecing, but is also used for quilting itself, can be used for embroidery, and can be used for English paper piecing and applique. So it's really the workhorse of the threads in Aurifil. And so we love that 50 weight. So the next most popular thread would be the 40 weight. And 40 weight is used quite often for the quilting itself, because it gives a little bit of a heavier appearance and a little more of a show for the quilting. And it's also used quite commonly by embroiderers. And it's interesting because embroiderers will say, oh, well, I don't use cotton thread because it's not strong enough. But you need to remember that Aurifil was originally designed to withstand the rigors of a high-speed 30-head embroidery machine, industrial embroidery machine. And if it can withstand that, it can certainly withstand the rigors of a domestic embroidery machine, and does a beautiful job. And if you're looking at, if you're watching the runway at the Oscars or wherever, and there are couture gowns with embroidery on them, you can bet that embroidery has been done with Aurifil thread.
Wow.
So it's lovely that way. Likewise, and I'll talk about it with some of the other weights, if you see some of the handbags that are embroidered by Chanel or Dior or Gucci or whomever, chances are that purse has been embroidered with Aurifil thread. So 40 weight was your next most popular. Then it goes to, the next most popular would be 12 weight, but I'm going to go in order of weights. So in the 40 weight, there is the 2-ply, but there's also a 40 weight 3-ply. That thread was initially designed in answer to long arm quilters who were also nervous about using cotton thread on their machines, but also wanted a bit of a heavier look when they were doing their quilting, so the quilting would show. So the 43-ply comes just in cones and is designed primarily for quilting. But it doesn't mean that the other threads aren't strong enough for a long arm machine. My long armor has used everything from 80 weight to 12 weight on her long arm. And to her great surprise, again, it withstands the rigors of those machines because it was designed to be strong.
Right.
So that 40 weight, you have a choice of 40 weight 2-ply or 40 weight 3-ply. And then next would be the 28 weight. And 28 weight is used again if you're going to be doing more, a bit of a heavier quilting. You really want your quilting to show. It's beautiful for that. Works wonderfully for top stitching. If you're making bags, it's excellent for top stitching. And it can be used for a heavier embroidery if you wish, but I would think most digital embroidery designs are designed to be compatible with the 40 weight 2-ply.
Right.
12 weight is really gaining in popularity now. Through COVID, the whole hand stitching and big stitching movement has really taken hold. And so the 12 weight is becoming quite popular. And it's all of these weights of thread come in 270 colors. So you've got wonderful choice. You can do whatever you want with whatever colors you want. Your customers can also order from you a thread chart with the actual thread colors so that they can look at their projects and know exactly what they want. There's also an 80 weight thread, and the 80 weight was designed, certainly can be used for quilting. If you're going to be doing very dense quilting, there's going to be less weight to the quilt itself, and it's going to blend into the background of the quilt. It's also become very popular for appliqueurs and for English paper piecers. It's a really nice fine thread. And also folks who are doing lingerie sewing or sewing with silks. If you're not wanting to use a silk thread, you can certainly use the 80 weight cotton thread for lingerie sewing, and it's perfect for that.
Wow.
The
Excellent.
80 weight thread is also awesome for embroidery, especially if you have a very finely detailed embroidery project where you want to see all of those fine details. And it also does a beautiful job of doing freestanding lace if you want a very fine freestanding lace. And last but certainly not least is Aurifil also has a 6-strand floss. And what I love about the 6-strand floss is that, and I've done my share of cross stitch over the years, and as for most of us who've done it, my biggest challenge is those skeins that just get tangled up like crazy. So you almost, if you don't want to drive yourself crazy, you almost have to take your floss and wind it onto this little card and label it and whatever, which is one more step that I frankly don't have the patience for, but you have to do it or you're going to have nothing but tangles. With Aurifil, they've put their 6-strand floss onto a spool. So you're not going to get that tangling, and it's still 270 colors. And we also have a conversion chart for DMC because many of the patterns are written based on DMC colors. So don't have quite as many colors as DMC, but with 270, you've got enough to have a choice. And if you're a very avid cross stitcher or needle pointer with 6-strand floss, you can order a beautiful satin box with all 270 colors if you wish. And you could do that with all of the threads if you wish. Right. And it just gives you that embroiderers will do that too, where they'll just order the box with all 270 colors, and then they've got everything they need anytime they want to do a project.
Nice. Now, the one other thread, Gail, is the wool thread.
Yes. So there is a wool, it's a wool acrylic blend. And it is, unlike the cotton thread, it has a really fuzzy look. It's intended to, because it's that wool thread. And it works wonderfully if you're doing those primitive wool projects and you want to be doing a blanket stitch or some kind of
little whip stitch,
applique or embroidery stitches on top. Exactly.
Right.
And so it's a lovely thread. I think it's 180 some odd colors in the wool. And it's a great thread for those big stitch, hand stitch quilters using the wool. Yes. Not intended to be used on your embroidery machine, not intended to be used on a long arm machine, but certainly could be used on your domestic machine. But because it does have that sort of hairy, fuzzy look, you are going to get lint with it.
Right. And the other thing I did want to,
and it's a 12 weight. It's a 12
sorry.
weight.
Yes, right. The other thing I did want to touch base with is just the different size of the spools, because yes, when people are comparing price, they're not comparing apples to apples.
You're right.
Of the size of the spool. So
right. So the spools with Aurifill, and of course the number of yards on the spool is different depending on whether it's 50 weight, 40 weight, whatever. You can obviously get more on a spool of a finer thread. Aurifill is actually priced very competitively. The large spools in particular, yard for yard, if you were to compare the price per yard of Aurifill thread in a 50 weight compared to a 50 weight thread of any other manufacturer, Aurifill is going to be more cost effective for you as the quilter. So you're getting the finest quality thread at the lowest cost. The smaller spools are not as price competitive. So our advice is always, if you're going to be using a color a lot, then purchase it in the large spools, because that's going to be your most cost effective way of doing it. If you just want a little bit of a certain color, then you can purchase it in the small spool if you wish.
Right. Yes. And that's sort of how we direct our customers as well, to for their best bang for their buck is the larger spools.
Yes.
And if they are going to use a color consistently in their piecing, to just choose a cone.
Yes, absolutely. The cone is going to be even more cost effective.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So that's sort of where we direct them. And not everybody understands how to use a cone, but we try to direct them with that too, and to get a cone holder and so on for their machine.
Right. Well, and interestingly, the way that that's a really good point, Tammy, but the way to use the cone, or the way to take the thread off the cone, is exactly the same way as you're going to take your thread off your spool. Because there are two ways of winding thread. There's cross wound and there's horizontally wound. And Aurifil thread is cross wound. So if you look at the spools or you look at the cones, you're going to see that the threads are crisscrossing. And when that happens, your thread has to come off the top of the spool. Okay, and I've got a cone here so I can actually show you. So whether it's and I have spools as well, but if it's, let's find the end here. Okay. So what you need to do, the thread has to come off the top.
Right.
You never want the thread coming off the side, because then you're going to weaken the thread and you're going to potentially have some breaks. So always off the top. So when it's a cone, as you said, you're going to want a cone holder beside your machine that'll pull it off. If it's a spool, I've got one here. Okay, if you've got, all right, my well-used spools. So if you have a large spool, same thing. You can have it in a cone holder and it can come off the top, which I know I do at my machine. The other thing you do, if you have a horizontal peg on your machine, then you want to put the stopper on the end so that your thread is not moving around in your machine. It's going to stay stable and still, and the thread is just going to come off the top. if you have an upright peg or a vertical peg on your machine, then you still want your thread coming off the top. So what you need is a machine that has one of the little holders at the top where it goes up through the holder and then down to thread through your machine. You never want your vertical holder. You don't want it coming off the side.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest thing for folks to get used to. I'm going to show one other fun thing that people don't realize with the large spool, and that is, how do you find the end of the spool, the end of the thread when you first buy it? When you open it up, what you do is you take off this little end cap, and under there is the end of your thread. And when you're done using your thread, just wind it around that bottom again, put the cap on, and you now have your thread that isn't going to unravel in your thread case or your sewing box.
Well, there's a handy tip. Perfect. Yeah. Good. Now, was there any other information that you feel is pertinent for our little video? I know you teach classes. And when we first opened, we did a wonderful thread seminar with you and your group. It was a great day and everybody learned so much. And I understand you're doing those by Zoom now rather than in person, which
I am
too. So if people are interested, we'll pursue that a little further. And
I'd be more than happy to do that again.
Right.
And we've even, the presentation has changed a bit from the one that was done in person. And so even if people did see it in person, you can always learn more each time. Sure. And we have in the Zoom presentation, I also have lots of examples of showing how the thread's used and different projects using different weights of threads, so they can see that. And we talk a bit about the history of the company, how it came about, what their goals are. We talk about the colors and how the colors are designed, and how you can rely on the color being the same no matter which spool of thread you've purchased, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting a color of thread and then going back and getting that same color of thread and you bring it home and it's completely different.
Yes.
With Aurifil, that's not the case. That's something that they've done for the industry, is that in the fine linen industry and the couture industry, from spool to spool, they have to be exactly the same, because you want your garments or your linens to look the same. So there are dye lots, and their color matching is really second to none from spool to spool. And, one might say, well, surely a formula is a formula. Well, that's not true, because the growing time and the sun and rain conditions for the base cotton are different every year. And so they have to constantly adjust the dye formula to compensate for the changes in the base cotton color.
Well, we certainly will encourage our customers to express interest to us after they've watched this video regarding the thread class, and hopefully we can get enough participants to join us via Zoom to take the class. And then we will contact you directly and we'll get something set up. So hopefully once people have watched this little video, they will be encouraged to pursue more information about Aurifil, and then we'll contact you. So Gail,
and the last thing we can help you with, Tammy, is, I know you've seen them. We gave them out when we did the presentation in your shop. But Aurifil has a wonderful little booklet that actually is color coded and actually goes weight by weight, telling you what needle to use, what thread to put in your bobbin, and also talks about the different uses for the different weights of thread. And we can make those booklets available to you for your customers. And they're just a really handy guide, which brings me to the one more thing that I should mention to you. And that is, let's see which ones I have here, is that Aurifil color codes their spools. And it's one of the things I absolutely love, because most of us, our eyes are not getting any younger. And so, just looking at a spool of thread, you want to know, did I just pick up a 28 weight or did I just pick up a 50 weight? So everyone is color coded. So all of the 50 weight spools are orange. All of the 28 weight spools are gray. All of the 12 weight spools are red and 40 weights are green. So when you go to your sewing cabinet or your thread boxes, you know just by looking at the color what weight you're picking up, which is great.
I agree. Sorry, I just got an ice cube in my mouth. That's not handy.
I understand.
Anyways, yeah, so thank you, Gail, for joining us and for taking time to help us with this little video. And we hope it encourages people to pursue more options in their Aurifil thread purchases. I do have a few of those little booklets left here, but I will stick those on my order next time to get a few more so that people will have them, especially for our Thread Club members. They've been having a lot of fun with our Thread Club. So thank you very much, Gail. And we will touch base again soon. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having me, Tammy.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.